Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. The envelope hit the table and my coffee jumped. "Read it." Dan's jaw clenched so hard it almost clicked. Lily watched me from the other side, fingers gripping her phone. In that second, I knew I was about to become the villain. I'm Erin, 42, and that morning cracked something open. Not just our marriage, not just the nice fake family story. It cracked whatever part of me still believed we were stable. If I had seen the whole picture then, I might have lied. I slid the envelope toward me and tried not to shake. My name wasn't on it, which already said a lot. Top school, big tuition, the kind of dream that burns fast. Lily's eyes shone like she expected a happy movie moment. "Full ride." I tried to sound hopeful and honestly I failed. "It's not," she whispered, like the words tasted wrong in her mouth. "There's aid, but not enough. It's still really expensive." She pushed a folded paper closer and waited for my reaction. Dan tapped the table with 2 fingers, steady and controlled. "You paid for Evan," he said, and my stomach tightened instantly. "Lily deserves the same support. We agreed on that already." He looked at me like the answer should be automatic yes. Here is the part I hate admitting now. For half a second I wanted to nod and fake confidence. Just smile, say we'd figure it out, kick the problem forward. That is how we survived a lot of things before this. Instead, I looked at the number on that page and froze. I swear my brain did simple math and then full panic. We did not have it, we weren't even close. Not without blowing up every other part of our life. "How much are they expecting from us?" My voice came out thin. Lily leaned forward and pointed to the bottom line, silent. Her nails dug tiny half-moons into the paper as she pressed. She already knew this conversation would hurt, I could see it. "That's per year," Dan added, like he wanted the punchline harder. "You covered more than that for Evan, you even bragged about it." He gave this short laugh that wasn't really a laugh at all. "Funny how generous you were when it made you look good." That jab landed, I won't pretend it didn't. I had been proud of helping before, I had talked about it. Helping made me feel useful, like I mattered in this patchwork family. Now every old story sounded like evidence against me, twisted sharp. Lily's leg bounced under the table and the phone lit up. She flipped it face down with this quick embarrassed movement. "I already told my friends I'm going," she said, voice shaking. "I worked so hard for this, I thought you'd be happy." Guilt crawled up my neck, hot and choking and loud. Not because I owed that specific college, but because she believed me. Maybe I hadn't promised outright, but I let Dan talk big. I sat there and let his words become my reputation. "We need to be realistic," I said, and everyone stiffened. That word realistic might as well have been traitor right then. Dan leaned back, crossed his arms, and waited for the blow. Lily's eyes glossed over like the tears were already queued up. "What does that mean?" she asked, lips barely moving as she spoke. It wasn't a question, it was a warning flare. I could still have tried to soften it, wrap it. Instead, I went straight at it because I was tired. "It means I can't do this again," I told them slowly. "We don't have that money, not without wrecking everything else." The room went quiet enough that the fridge hum sounded loud. I almost wished someone would interrupt, just to give me cover. "You managed for Evan," Dan said, hands spreading like it was simple. "So forgive me if I don't buy this sudden poverty act." He turned to Lily, not to me, and his voice warmed. "Your brother didn't have to beg like this, did he?" There it was, the comparison laid out like a weapon. I saw Lily swallow, saw the betrayal land, watched it stick. Whatever she thought about me shifted in that exact breath. I felt it, that tiny click where trust drops out. "You chose him over me," she said, staring straight through me. It hit harder than any insult Dan had thrown all year. Because it wasn't about school anymore, it was about worth. In her head, I had already tallied their value and decided. I wanted to scream that it wasn't like that at all. I wanted to talk about timing and numbers and conditions. But none of that sounds like love when you say it aloud. It sounds like excuses, like a spreadsheet where feelings should be. "We are not doing this as a performance," I tried to push back. "No one here is less loved, this is about what we can manage." Even as I said it, I heard how cold it landed. Money and love in the same sentence never feels good. Lily pushed her chair back fast and it scraped across the floor. Manage your own life then, she snapped, standing without looking away. I'll remember this when Evan visits in his fancy career. She grabbed the envelope and her phone and walked out. The slam of her bedroom door echoed down the hallway like thunder. Dan and I stayed at the table, two statues with bills. He looked at me like I was a stranger who'd tricked him. That hurt more than the yelling that came next, honestly. You're unbelievable, he finally whispered, which was worse than shouting. You knew this was her dream, and you killed it in seconds. He rubbed his forehead like the sight of me caused a headache. You always act generous until it costs you something for real. I laughed, this short, ugly sound that surprised even me. Cost me, I repeated, because that part knocked the air out. I thought about the extra shift, the savings, the quiet sacrifices. Apparently those weren't real costs, they were just my duty. He slammed his palm down once, sharp enough to make me flinch. Fine, play martyr, it doesn't change what you just did upstairs. His voice dropped lower, calmer, which scared me more than anger. She will never forget this, and neither will I. Here is the truth I only admit now. I almost chased Lily, almost caved right there to fix the story. Forget it, we'll figure it out, of course we'll pay. The words lined up in my throat and waited for release. But I saw the number again in my mind and stopped. I saw us selling everything, sliding deeper into quiet panic. I imagined resenting her every semester and hating myself for it. That version of me felt even worse than the villain's seat. So I stayed in my chair and let the silence spread. Dan walked away first, muttering something about priorities and loyalty. The envelope was gone, the table cleared, but the fight stayed. That was the morning I chose not to fix it with money. At the time I thought it was one brutal argument. Now I know it was the first crack in a hidden fault line. The sound of that door upstairs still rings when I remember it. Because it wasn't just about college that day, not really. I opened my laptop before the front door even stopped rattling. Dan had walked out after the fight and left his keys. That told me everything about his mood without one more word. If I wanted any chance later, I needed facts ready. The banking page loaded and my pulse kicked harder. I went straight to the old transfers instead of the balance. Every payment with Evan's college name sat there in a long line. Watching the totals stack up felt like watching a slow accident. I grabbed an old notebook and started copying numbers down. Not neat, not straight, just big jagged figures across the page. By the fourth line my hand cramped and I barely noticed. I just kept writing until the full amount finally stared back. Seeing that sum now, even in my memory, makes my chest tight. At the time I just exhaled once and almost laughed. No wonder my body had screamed when Lily slid that paper. We were already carrying a ghost tuition on our backs. I circled the final number and added our mortgage underneath. Then the car payment, then the minimum for Dan's card. It wasn't some grand budget chart, it was a panic map. One wrong promise and the whole thing tipped off the edge. The front door opened again and hit the wall a little hard. I didn't move from the chair, didn't close the screen. If he wanted to accuse me of lying, he could read. His footsteps came down the hallway slower than before. You making a spreadsheet of excuses now? His coat hit a chair. He walked into the room, eyes already on the laptop glow. I slid the notebook toward him instead of answering his jab. His gaze dropped to the circled figure and lingered. This is what we already helped with, I said, keeping my voice low. No loans in his name, remember, that was your big condition. I tapped the total and waited for something human to appear. He took a breath through his teeth like it actually stung. You wanted that, he muttered, pinching the bridge of his nose. You were the one who said you couldn't sleep if he borrowed. That part was true, which made it burn even more deeply. Good intentions are heavy when someone throws them back like that. The source matters, I answered, pointing at the date column. That money came from my inheritance, not from our shared paycheck. I heard my own tone getting sharper and hated it. I told you once it was gone, there was nothing left. He pulled the notebook closer and flipped to a blank page. So what, you want a medal for caring about my son? His pen scratched a question mark next to the total. You're acting like this bill only ever sat in your lap. It did sit there, I snapped, because that part felt stolen. The checks had my name, the school called my number when confused. I caught myself gripping the edge of the table hard. What you remember as teamwork was me juggling and not sleeping. He straightened, shoulders tight, and pointed back toward the hallway. She doesn't know any of this, she just knows results. Then his voice dropped lower, almost calm, and it chilled me. Kids remember who showed up, not who logged in and clicked. That line landed cleaner than any insult he'd thrown earlier. Because he wasn't entirely wrong, and we both knew it. I could tell Lily every boring detail and she'd still hurt. Feelings do not balance out just because the math looks tidy. So tell her the truth, I pushed, even though I doubted him. Tell her that money came from my family and is gone. My throat tightened on that last word, and I hated that wobble. Tell her you knew there was no second pile waiting. He looked away toward the doorway like he expected Lily to appear. She's already shattered, you want me to show her statements next. His voice had that wounded father tone that shuts people up. Great plan, let's drag her through your financial anxiety tour. I laughed once, short and mean, because I couldn't stop it. If this is just my anxiety, why are you this furious? I nudged the notebook until it brushed his hand. You're mad because you promised something you never checked first. He jerked his hand back like the paper burned. I promised based on history, he fired back, jaw tight again. History is you stepping up when my kids needed help. He spread his arms like the conclusion should be obvious. There it was, stripped clean, the story he'd built over years. In his mind, I wasn't a person with limits, I was a pattern. Dozens of small rescues had turned into some permanent guarantee. If I stop now, I look like I loved her less. History also includes math, I said, forcing each word steady. We don't have another inheritance, we only have one future. I pointed at the bottom of the page where nothing continued. There is no secret column where more cash appears later. He stared at the notebook a long moment without answering. I watched his throat move like he swallowed something bitter. For a second, I thought he might actually say you're right. Instead, he pushed the notebook away with one finger. You always find a reason when it's her, he finally muttered. With Evan you just acted, with her you stall and calculate. His eyes met mine and there was no trust left. If you loved them equally, you'd stretch again somehow. That line cut deeper than anything from the morning argument. Because it went straight past money and straight into my chest. I know I care about both of them, I know that. Hearing doubt from him still made me question myself for a second. You keep saying stretch, I whispered, leaning closer across the table. Stretch to where? What do you expect us to live on? My pulse pounded in my ears as I waited for an answer. He looked away again, which was an answer on its own. In that silence, I realized something I had ignored for years. He never actually looked at this stuff unless there was drama. He remembered my help as magic, not as delayed bills and anxiety. He liked the headline but never read the fine print underneath. I closed the laptop with a soft thud and he flinched. If we do this again, something else breaks, I said quietly. Retirement, the house, your credit, maybe all three, who knows? Listing them out made the danger feel even more real. He rubbed his hands over his face and left them there. Fine, he said through his fingers, voice muffled and exhausted. Then you go tell her you chose that over her dream. He dropped his hands and stared like that verdict belonged to me. That was the corner right there, the one I still replay. He didn't say we chose, he put it squarely on my shoulders. If I stuck to the numbers, I became the villain forever. If I caved, I drowned us and blamed her in secret. I picked up the notebook and pressed it to my chest. I'm not taking the fall for both of us, I managed. You made promises without asking, you own that part too. My voice shook, but I didn't back down this time. He pushed his chair back and stood slower than before. You really think Reddit will side with you on this? That threw me for a second, the way he said Reddit. Like he already pictured me typing furiously for strangers' votes. At this point, strangers might listen better than you do. The words slipped out before I could swallow them down. We locked eyes, neither of us blinking for several long beats. Then he turned away and walked down the hall without another word. Once he disappeared, I opened the laptop again with shaking fingers. I scrolled past Evan's old payments and into the rest of our history. Somewhere in those rows, something felt off, like a missing tooth. I didn't know yet what it was, but I could feel it. My hand stopped on the hallway wall when I heard my name. I was walking past the living room, just going to grab laundry. Then I heard my voice used like a coupon for college. That single second is the one I keep rewinding now. I told you your future is covered, we've got you. Dan's tone was smooth, almost relaxed, which already sound suspicious. I moved back a step until I could see the doorway edge. I didn't go in, I just hovered there and listened. Lily sat on the couch, shoulders pulled in like she expected bad news. Her hands twisted the corner of some brochure into a tight roll. What if I don't get enough aid? She asked, staring at him. What if they say no and I can't go anywhere decent? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, giving her full attention. Then we do what we did for your brother, he told her. We fill the gap, we make it work, you focus on grades. My name left his mouth next, wrapped in this easy confidence. You know how she is, he went on, thumb pointing toward the kitchen. She cannot stand seeing a kid miss school because of money. He chuckled like this was some cute quirk I had. You think she'd let you stay home while he got a degree? Hearing that laugh hit me harder than the words themselves. He was painting me generous, which sounds flattering on paper. Inside my chest it felt like he was signing for me. He was writing checks with my conscience and my account. Are you sure? Lily asked, voice barely above a whisper. If I get into somewhere big, you'll actually help like that. Her eyes were wide, hopeful, scared, everything mixed in one look. She needed a solid yes, not a cautious maybe. We've done it once, we'll do it again, I promise. He reached over and squeezed her knee, confident like it was settled. You heard her brag about helping before, that's just who she is. He smiled and I felt my stomach dip hard. I almost stepped into the room right then and blew it up. Part of me wanted to say hold on, let's check first. Another part watched them and thought let them have this moment. I told myself we'd sit down later and fix the details. That choice right there, staying in the hall, changed everything. I backed away on quiet feet like I was the intruder. Told myself not to be dramatic, told myself it would be fine. Spoiler, it was not fine and I knew it deep down. That memory slammed back the night after the kitchen exploded. I was loading the dishwasher when the hallway scene replayed again. Her face, his promise, my silence, all lined up like a list. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped a glass in the sink. Enough, I told myself out loud, which startled even me. If he had promised based on some mystery cushion, I needed proof. If there was actually a plan, I wanted to see it. If there wasn't, I refused to carry this blame alone. I grabbed the laptop and sat at the table, heart hammering. No background show, no music, nothing except the hum in my ears. My fingers went straight to the bank login without hesitation. At that point, I knew exactly where I needed to look. There used to be a separate account for Lily's future. Not huge, not glamorous, but something with her name attached. We had opened it years ago during one rare calm conversation. Back when college was this distant word, not a grenade. I searched through the account list and didn't see it at first. Savings, checking, the old joint one, the emergency fund, nothing labeled hers. My throat tightened while I clicked the tiny link for archived accounts. That was the moment my pulse really started to race. There it was, her name, little note saying inactive beside it. I clicked into the history, palms sweaty on the keyboard. The current balance showed up in a single stark line. Zero, just zero, like the account had never mattered. I actually blinked a few times, convinced I was misreading. Refreshed the page, logged out, logged back in like that would help. Same blank number, same inactive note, same quiet slap in the face. It felt like the screen was daring me to argue. I scrolled down into the past transactions with my jaw clenched. Withdrawal after withdrawal lined up, all around the same rough period. The amounts weren't tiny, and they all moved to our joint account. I counted how many times that had happened and lost track. My brain started connecting dates before I even wanted it to. Late notices, tense arguments, that week the card company kept calling. Those temporary transfers he had mentioned during one stressed-out evening. Turns out temporary had a very permanent definition for him. I clicked one withdrawal and looked at the little description line. A note from years ago popped up, written in his rushed shorthand. "We'll replace later when things stabilize," followed by a smiley. The casual tone made my fingers curl into fists. I scrolled further, hoping to see deposits flowing back in. There were a few tiny ones from years back, then nothing. For a long stretch the account just sat there slowly draining out. Then one day, everything remaining moved out in a single transfer. Seeing that final sweep, that one big move, made my chest throb. This wasn't a small oversight, this was a decision repeated many times. He had chosen bills over her future and never tea. Old her once. Then he stood in our living room and sold me as the hero. I printed the last page before I could talk myself out of it. Watched the numbers appear in black and white in my hand. It felt heavier than it should, like the paper carried voices. His promise, her trust, my silence, all jammed together in rows. For a few seconds I just stood there, paper shaking slightly. I wanted to rip it up and pretend I never saw it. Wanted to shove the whole thing in a drawer and act clueless. Wanted to stay the easy villain instead of adding this betrayal. Instead I laid the sheet on the table and pressed my palm down. I wasn't going to unsee it, and I wasn't taking this alone. The morning's fight suddenly looked different with these numbers underneath. This time when footsteps sounded down the hall, I didn't move away. "When were you planning to tell her this is empty?" I didn't even wait for him to step fully into the kitchen. The printout lay in the center of the table under my hand. He froze in the doorway like he'd walked into a trap. His eyes dropped to the page, then to my fingers. He didn't ask what it was, which told me plenty. A long breath left him, slow and annoyed, not surprised. "That what we're doing now?" he muttered, audits. I slid the paper closer so the zero sat right between us. "Her account is dead," I said, my voice steady somehow. Not low, not struggling, gone, you already knew that. I tapped the last transfer line until the sheet crinkled. He moved farther in and pulled out a chair with his foot. Didn't sit, just leaned on the back like he might bolt. "That money kept this house standing," he answered, jaw working. "You were there when things got rough, you remember that." "I remember overdue notices," I said, keeping my eyes on his. "I do not remember you saying, hey, let's drain Lily's savings." My throat felt raw, and I hadn't even raised my voice yet. "If you said that clearly, I missed the part about wiping everything." He pushed the paper flat with his palm, covering the zero. "We were drowning," he snapped, shoulders tight, eyes suddenly bright. "I used what was available because I didn't want collections involved." He swallowed hard and dropped his hand back to his side. "Available," I repeated, because that word hit like a slap. "Not yours, not mine, hers. You pulled from her future without asking." I pointed to the small note on the printout with her name. "She knows this account exists, even if she forgot the numbers." He rubbed the back of his neck, pacing one slow step. "We put both our names on it, remember," he threw back. "That makes it household money, not some sacred altar you worship." His laugh came out sharp and bitter around the edges. "That label says college fund," I answered, tapping the heading. "Not Dad's emergency slush pile or credit card rescue kit." My hands were shaking now, but I didn't hide them. "We told her this was her safety net, and you cut it." "That safety net doesn't exist if we lose the house," he shot back. He finally sat hard, like his knees gave out for a second. "You think she wants tuition savings while we're sleeping in a motel?" His fingers drummed once on the table, quick and restless. I stared at him for a heartbeat because I got that fear. I know what it feels like when every bill looks dangerous. But this wasn't one desperate choice, this was a slow, repeated pick. "You didn't stop at one transfer," I said quietly. His gaze flicked to the list of withdrawals and away again. "I always meant to put it back," he said, softer now. "Every time I moved money, I told myself it was temporary." He pinched the bridge of his nose and squeezed his eyes shut. "You never did, though," I answered, not letting him drift away. "You had years, you had time to add even small amounts." I slid my finger down to that last huge transaction. "Instead you cleaned it out in one go and just left it." He stared at that final line like it might change if he glared. That last one covered the card before they hiked the interest. His voice sounded tired now, not just angry. And part of that card was helping my son survive school. There it is, I whispered, sitting down across from him slowly. You're still counting this as some noble sacrifice for Evan. I shook my head, feeling something cold settle under my ribs. Debt is debt, you don't get to say you stole from Lily for him. He bristled at the word stole, like I'd slapped him outright. Watch that word, he growled, leaning forward over the table. I didn't rob my own kid, I moved family money towards survival. His knuckles pressed white against the wood as he gripped the edge. You didn't rob her with a mask on, I shot back. You did it with passwords and good intentions and no follow-through. I leaned in too, meeting him halfway over the paperwork. And then you let her believe there was still something here. He jerked his chin toe. Ard the hallway where her door was closed. She wasn't checking balances, she doesn't even remember that login. He exhaled loud, like I was being unreasonable for noticing. She only cares now because you said no this morning. I laughed once, ugly and short, because that twisted logic floored me. She cares because you told her everything was covered, I fired back. You guaranteed help that didn't exist and used me as proof. My nails bit into my palm under the table, hard enough to hurt. He rolled his eyes, which somehow infuriated me more than yelling. I base that on your track record, he answered, voice low. You always come through when the kids are in trouble, always. He lifted his hands like that settled the entire debate. Track record, I repeated, my voice going flat. I'm not a rewards card, Dan, I'm a human being with limits. I tapped the 0 again for emphasis, hearing the paper crackle. This is what happens when you assume I will always refill. He slumped back, jaw working, eyes landing everywhere except my face. So what, you want me to march upstairs with that sheet? He jerked his head toward the printout like it was radioactive. Wave it around and tell her sorry, your dad failed math. Yes, I answered faster than he expected, and his eyes finally met mine. I want you to own that you emptied her cushion without fixing it. I pushed the paper across until it bumped his wrist. And I want you to stop throwing me in front of her like a shield. His expression tightened at that, a small flicker of guilt maybe. You stood there earlier, he reminded me, voice suddenly quiet. You heard her and didn't correct anything, you let me speak. He lifted the paper but didn't actually read it. He wasn't wrong about that part and it stung. That hallway moment is on me, I admitted, my stomach nodding. I froze, I didn't want to crush her before we checked numbers. I took a breath, steady and slow, so I wouldn't start shouting. But this, I went on, tapping the printed dates with one finger. This is on you, these transfers, this decision made again and again. I softened my tone, even though my chest felt too tight. You can't dump this all on the woman who finally says enough. He finally looked down and actually read a line. The little note he'd typed years ago stared back at him. Replace later when things settle, he whispered almost to himself. His mouth twisted like he didn't recognize his own optimism anymore. There was a pause, then a long one, where the room felt crowded. Not with things, with everything left unsaid between us. He rubbed his thumb over that tiny note and shook his head. I thought we'd catch up, he murmured, sounding worn out. We didn't, I answered, no softness left for that part. And now it's gone, and she's upstairs thinking I wrecked her chances. I folded my hands together on the table to keep them still. I'm not carrying that narrative while you hide in the background. He bristled again at the implied coward label, shoulders tightening. I've been here for every meltdown in this house, he snapped. I talk her down when she spirals, I show up, I stay. He jabbed a finger toward his chest, eyes hot. Showing up without honesty is performance, not parenting, I replied. If you want to be the involved dad, start with truth. I leaned back and let the chair legs thump once on the floor. Tell her where her college fund went, all of it, every piece. He stared at me like I'd suggested setting the house on fire. She's already hanging by a thread, he muttered, rubbing his temples. You saw her face, you really want to pile this on now. His voice cracked slightly, and that almost got to me. Almost not enough. She's hanging by a thread because she thinks love is conditional, I said. She thinks some scoreboard exists where Evan won and she lost. I pointed toward the hallway again, more gently this time. Right now she believes I decided she was less important than him. He flinched at that, just a tiny movement around his eyes. That's not what I meant to show her, he whispered almost hoarse. I wanted both of them to feel like someone had their back. His hand landed flat on the table and stayed there. You can't fix that feeling by inventing money, I answered. You fix it by telling her you screwed up and are trying. I nudged the printout again until it crossed into his space. I'm willing to sit there with you, I'm not willing to take the blame. He pushed the paper away again and stood abruptly. If I tell her this, she'll never look at me the same, he said. He turned toward the sink, shoulders squared like he was bracing. And you know that's what you're really after, isn't it? That accusation knocked the air out of me. You think I enjoy watching her cry over this? I asked. You think I want her to see you as the villain instead of me? I felt heat rise up my neck, and furious. He glanced back at me, eyes narrowed, searching my face. I think you're tired of being the bad guy, he replied. And this is a perfect chance to shift the story onto me. His mouth twisted into a bitter half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. I am tired of being the bad guy, I admitted, voice low. I'm tired of being the only adult who hears the word no. I reached for the printout and held it up in my hand. But more than that, I'm tired of this lie you built. We stood there staring at each other while the printer hummed again. I'd hit reprint without even realizing, wanting another copy. This time I didn't lay it down on the table. I folded it in half and slid it into a folder. I'm keeping this, I told him, holding his gaze. In case I need proof later when everyone forgets details. My voice steadied as I spoke, which surprised even me. Because I know how stories shift in this house. He watched my hand tuck the folder into my bag. You planning to show that to Reddit too? He asked. Attach files to your little post and ask for judgment. The sarcasm dripped, but under it I heard something like fear. If I ever write this down, I answered, it'll be because no one here listened. I zipped the bag closed with one quick motion. Right now, I'm still hoping you'll do the right thing yourself. I walked past him, forcing myself not to brush against his shoulder. Upstairs, Lily's music thumped faintly through her door. I stood there a moment, hand raised, thinking about knocking. Every muscle in my arm felt heavy with the decision. I let it drop and went back down instead. That night the house settled into this shaky quiet. No jokes from the living room, no shared show, no casual talk. Just doors closing, occasional footsteps, and my own thoughts running wild. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, waiting for something. My phone buzzed around midnight on the nightstand. Not a call, just a string of alerts lighting up the screen. Group chat names, familiar contacts, even a cousin I rarely heard from. Every preview had the same phrase buried in it somewhere. Is this about you? Did you really say that to her? While this is messy, are you okay? I unlocked the phone and opened the first link. Lily's social page filled the screen with a long paragraph. She hadn't named us directly, but it wasn't subtle at all. Enough detail that anyone close would know exactly who she meant. My eyes moved line by line even though my stomach rolled. Imagine watching your stepmother pay full college for your brother, she wrote. Then when it's your turn, she says money matters more than you. She added a crying emoji and a broken heart for flair. She painted me cold, controlling, obsessed with finances and fairness. She called me out for being nice until things cost me. She talked about my real colors coming out when she needed me most. And she mentioned her father being devastated that I refused to help. No mention of drained accounts. No hint that any savings had been used during hard times. Just a clean, simple story everyone could easily get mad about. I felt my ribs tighten like someone had wrapped tape around them. I scrolled through the comments even though I knew better. Friends hyping her up, calling me selfish, saying they'd cut me off. One person wrote that I sounded jealous of her potential. Another suggested she move out the second she turned 18. I locked the phone and set it face down on the bed. For a minute I just breathed, slow and careful, in and out. Part of me wanted to march into her room right then. Another part knew that would only feed the fire tonight. Instead, I walked back to the kitchen and reopened my bag. I pulled out the folder with the printout and laid it down. Underneath it, I placed the notebook with the earlier numbers. 2 piles of facts in a house full of opinions. The front door rattled around 10 the next morning. I was still in sweats, coffee half finished, hair shoved up. I figured it was a delivery until I heard a familiar voice. "Aaron," Evan called, tone tight, "are you home?" My stomach dropped in that weird slow way, like an elevator. I walked to the entry and there he stood, phone in hand. He held it up before I could even say hello. On the screen was Lily's post, bright and accusing. "We need to talk about this," he said, stepping inside. His eyes weren't hostile, just uneasy, like he wanted answers. I woke up to 6 messages and this thing blowing up. He locked the door behind him out of habit and faced me. "Kitchen," I said, because if we were doing this, we'd sit. He followed me in and spotted the papers on the table. Recognition flashed across his face at the bank logo and layout. He pulled out a chair and sat without being asked. I sat across from him and pushed the folder his way. "This is the part she doesn't know," I told him. "I'm not showing you to drag your sister, I need in text." My fingers curled around my mug to keep them still. He opened the folder and scanned the first sheet. His eyes tracked down the list of withdrawals slowly and carefully. When he reached the final transfer, his brows pulled together hard. "Is this what I think it is?" he asked, tapping the line. "That used to be her college fund," I answered, voice steady. "It started small, but it was meant to grow. It never did." I nodded toward the zero at the top of the page. "Now there's nothing left, and she thinks I just refused help." He blew out a breath and leaned back in his chair. "You didn't show her this?" he asked, glancing up at me. "You just told her no and took the hit." There was no judgment in his tone, just confusion. "I asked your dad to tell her the truth," I replied. "He said it would destroy her if she knew we used it." I swallowed, feeling that familiar burn climb my throat again. So right now she only has one villain in her story. He rubbed his jaw, eyes still on the transactions. "These dates," he murmured, tracing down the column with one finger. "Some of these line up with when he called me struggling." He tapped a couple of specific entries, deep in thought. "They were rough months," I agreed, nodding once. "We had choices like food or minimum payments. It wasn't pretty." I rested my elbows on the table and laced my fingers together. But I never knowingly signed off on emptying this entire account. He looked up again, face more serious now, almost older. "Did you know I've been sending him money back?" he asked quietly. "Not huge amounts but steady, every month for over a year." His thumb unlocked his phone and opened his banking app. My heart climbed up into my throat as he scrolled. He turned the screen so I could see recent transfers clearly. Line after line of deposits to his dad's account filled the display. All labeled with simple notes like "for school" and "for you guys." "I thought this was helping replace what you spent on me," he said. He told me he was using it to rebuild the cushion. He pointed at the zero on the printed balance with a tight jaw. Clearly that didn't happen. The room tilted for a second, or it felt like it did. "You've been paying him back this whole time?" I asked. My voice came out softer, almost stunned. "And nobody told me, not once." He let out a humorless laugh and shook his head. "I asked how things were going whenever we talked," he said. "He always said we were fine, that you were relieved." He stared down at his phone like it had betrayed him. That's why he kept acting like Evan's tuition broke us, I thought. Out loud I only said, he never mentioned a single payment. I tapped the printout again, more gently this time. "And he definitely didn't put it back here." Evan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "For what it's worth, I never expected you to fund everything," he said. "I was grateful, but I also knew it was heavy on you." He met my eyes and there was no judgment there. "I believed him when he said you were all in on this," he added. "He framed it like you two agreed, and I was just lucky." He looked toward the hallway where Lily's room sat, invisible but loud. "Now she thinks you just drew a line for no reason." I felt a tired laugh bubble up and pushed it down. I drew a line because there is no more to draw on, I answered. And because your father promised on my behalf without checking reality. I paused, letting the weight of that settle for both of us. Evan nodded slowly, jaw tight, then turned his phone back to himself. He opened Lily's post and read through it again, eyes narrowed. She's hurting and she's dramatic, but this is rough, he murmured. He rubbed his thumb over the edge of the screen, thinking. I don't blame her for being upset, I said and meant it. I blame the version of the truth she got handed. I gestured toward the paper with her empty fund. This part would reshape how she sees all of it. He looked at the statements again, then back at me. So what do you want me to do? He asked. Because I'm not comfortable letting this sit like it is. His voice had that careful edge, like he was stepping into a minefield. I took a moment before answering because this mattered. I don't want you barging in and unloading everything on her, I said. She's already spinning, and if it comes from you, it's chaos. I rubbed my forehead, feeling a dull throb building there. But I also don't want to be the only one holding truth, I continued. I need someone else in this family who understands the full picture. I placed my hand on the folder and slid it closer to him. If you're willing, keep a copy, just in case. He hesitated, then nodded once and took the papers. I'll scan these and send them to myself, he said quietly. I'm not going to blast them anywhere, I just want record. He folded them neatly, far more carefully than his dad had looked. I'm going to talk to him, he added after a beat. Not as your messenger, as the person he used to justify this. His mouth hardened at the corners, resolve setting in. He doesn't get to hide behind my name while you take hits. Some knot in my chest loosened just a little. It might not change anything, I warned because I'd learned. He's dug in deep on this version where I'm the obstacle. I watched Evan carefully, not wanting to load him with my resentment. I know he's stubborn, Evan answered, giving a small, humorless smile. But he cares a lot about how I see him. He tucked the papers into his bag with a firm zip. I can work with that for now. We sat in silence for a few seconds after that. You ever have that heavy quiet where no one knows the next move? That's where we were, just listening to the faint noise upstairs. Finally, Evan spoke again, voice softer. Do you regret helping me? He asked, eyes searching my face. Be honest, not the polite answer, the real one. He held my gaze like he could handle whatever came out. That question hit deeper than anything else that morning. I took a breath and really thought before speaking. No, I said, and it came out solid. I regret how it was handled. I regret promises made without me. I forced myself not to look away. I wish we talked numbers with you from the start, I added. So you knew exactly what it cost and what was possible. I shrugged one shoulder, feeling the weight of it all over again. But no, I don't regret giving you a shot. His shoulders eased a little, like he'd been braced for something worse. Then I'm going to try to make sure Lily knows that too, he said. Even if she hates both of us for a while. He stood, bag over his shoulder, eyes set on some private plan. As he moved toward the door, my phone buzzed again. Another notification from that same post, more comments piling up. I didn't pick it up, just listened to the vibration against the table. It sounded like a countdown to whatever came next. Evan paused at the doorway and looked back at me once more. She's not the only one he's been lying to, he said quietly. Remember that when he tries to twist this around tonight. Then he stepped outside and pulled the door shut behind him. I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the closed door. The house felt like it was holding its breath, waiting. Upstairs, Lily moved around her room, floorboards creaking lightly. In my head, I started rehearsing a conversation I knew she'd hate. I knocked once on her door and didn't wait. I opened it a little and saw her on the bed. Phone in her hand, eyes swollen, music up just enough. She froze when she realized it was me in the doorway. We need to talk downstairs, I said, gripping the frame. Me, your dad, you, I want everything on the table. She snorted and rolled her eyes hard like it hurt. Another lecture on being realistic, she muttered, thumb still on her screen. Not a lecture, I answered because I meant it this time. I have something you haven't seen yet, and you deserve it. That made her pause for half a second, just long enough. She killed the music and swung her legs to the floor. She walked past me without answering, shoulders squared like armor. I followed her down, hearing every step like it might crack. By the time we reached the kitchen, Dan was already waiting. He stood at the table, arms crossed, eyes wary and cold. The printouts sat in a stack in front of my chair. I took my seat, let them stay visible, did not touch them. Lily hovered near the doorway, looking from him to me. "You going to yell again?" she asked, mouth tight, voice thin. "No shouting," I said, lifting my hands from the table. "Just numbers and choices, you can ask anything after that." Dan let out a short, humorless breath that almost counted as a laugh. "Here we go," he muttered, rubbing his jaw, eyes narrowed. Before I could start, the doorbell rang hard and fast. Lily flinched, Dan swore under his breath, I just stared. I already knew who it probably was, my stomach knew first. I stood up and went to the door without answering questions. Evan stood there with his bag over one shoulder, jaw set. He lifted his chin when he saw me, eyes already serious. "Got your message," he said, voice low but steady, no greeting. "I'm not missing this conversation, not after what I saw earlier." Behind me, Dan's voice cut in sharp from the kitchen doorway. "This is between us and your sister, not a group trial." Evan stepped inside anyway, shutting the door with one firm push. "Too late," he answered, walking past me toward the table. Lily's eyes widened when she saw him, then glossed with tears. "You saw the post?" she asked, voice cracking on the last word. "Everyone saw it," he answered, pulling out the chair beside her. "And that's why we're doing this now, with facts, not just feelings." I sat again and placed my hand on the stack of papers. "I'm going to show you something you won't like," I told her. "But it's real, and it should have been explained years ago." She swallowed hard, lips pressed together, eyes locked on my hand. I slid the top sheet toward her and let go. Her name sat at the top, printed in neat banking font. Lily frowned, confused, glancing from the page to my face. "What is this?" she asked, barely moving her mouth around the words. "Your savings account for school," I answered, forcing my tone calm. "The one we opened when you were younger, the one we mentioned." She blinked, staring at the header, memory slowly catching up. "There was money in that," she said, like she needed confirmation. "There was," I agreed, nodding once, keeping my eyes steady. "Look at the bottom line, the current balance, the status." She dragged her gaze down the page, using her finger to guide. When she reached the zero, something drained out of her expression. Her head snapped toward me so fast it almost looked painful. "You emptied this and then told me no," she blurted. "That's what you're saying here, you wiped it before I applied." Dan stepped forward quickly, one hand outstretched toward the papers. "That's not what she's saying," he cut in, voice tight and clipped. He grabbed for the printout, but Lily held it out of reach. "Do not grab this," she snapped, eyes blazing, hand shaking. "If this is about me, I'm reading every line until I understand." I sat on my hands so I wouldn't intervene too soon. "Check the dates," I said instead, letting my words do the push. "See when the withdrawals started and where they went each time." Her eyes dropped again, scanning the column with growing confusion. "These all go into your joint account," she said slowly, frowning deeper. "Over and over, then there's one big one at the end." She lifted her gaze to Dan, not to me, eyes wet. "Why is my name on an account you treated like your wallet?" He straightened, pulling his shoulders back like he needed height. "We were in trouble," he answered, voice softer but still strained. "That fund kept us from losing everything. You like your room, right?" He gestured toward the hallway, like the house itself was his witness. "You borrowed from me without asking," she shot back, voice rising. "And then you stood in the living room and promised I was covered." Her hand shook harder, crinkling the corner of the printout. "You made me hate her for something you did quietly." He flinched just a flicker, then hardened again. "I always planned to put it back when things improved," he insisted. "I told myself every transfer was temporary, that I'd rebuild it." His eyes slid toward me for half a second like it was shared. "Except you never rebuilt it," Evan cut in, leaning forward. He pulled his own copy from his bag and laid it down. "I've been sending you money every month to repay tuition help." He tapped the deposits on his phone screen and then the statements. Lily's head swung between them like she was watching a match. You paid him back? She asked, Evan, voice thin and stunned. You never told me that part, you never mentioned any of this. He gave a short bitter laugh and shook his head, eyes down. I thought I was helping replenish your fund, he answered quietly. I asked him if it was going there, he told me yes. He pushed his phone closer so she could see each transfer. Turns out I was just filling a hole I never saw. Dan's jaw clenched, his hands balling into fists near his sides. Do you have any idea how hard it was to stay afloat? He snapped. I used what I had, I juggled, I kept this place standing. He glared at me, like my silence made everything worse somehow. I know exactly how hard it was, I answered, finally raising my voice. I was there working extra, making calls, choosing which bill waited. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table for balance. What I didn't know was that you emptied her cushion without telling us. Lily folded the page in half and then in half again. She pressed it against her knee, almost like she needed something solid. So when you told me you'd do what you did for him, she asked, did you already know there was nothing saved for me at all? Dan hesitated just long enough for the answer to show. His eyes flickered to me, then to Evan, then to her. I figured we'd figure something out, he finally said, words stumbling. I trusted that we would find a way, like we always do. You trusted that she would, Lily shot back, pointing straight at me. You built this whole thing on the idea she'd sacrifice forever. Her voice broke on the last word and she swallowed hard. And you let me blast her online while you hid this. That part hit him like a slap I didn't have to deliver. He opened his mouth, then shut it, then tried again slower. I didn't want to crush you right before acceptances came, he said. I thought if I kept hope alive, we see. Would fix it behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, I repeated, feeling my own temper spike. That phrase right there is the problem, like we're running a show. I pointed toward Lily's phone on the table, screen still lit. Her whole world is already watching, with half the story and none of this. Lily wiped her face with the back of her hand, quick and angry. So where does that leave me? She asked, eyes shining and red. I busted my ass in school, I got into this place, I did everything. She held up the folded letter with a small shaking gesture. I took a breath because this was the part I refused to sugarcoat. You earned that spot, I said, making sure she heard that first. No one can take that away from you, not even these numbers. I tapped the papers lightly, then dropped my hand back. What we cannot do, I continued, pace slow and deliberate, is pretend we can pay that bill without destroying everything else. I thought of the mortgage, the retirement account, the card balances. If we chase this tuition, there is nothing left to catch us. So you're just saying give up, she shot back immediately. Forget the place I worked for and go to some random cheap option. The word cheap came out like a curse, heavy and loaded. You'd never have asked him to do that, not in a million years. Evan shifted beside her, his knee bumping the table. Hold on, he cut in, lifting a hand gently toward her. She's not saying your dream is trash, she's saying the bill is impossible. His gaze flicked to me for a second, then back to his sister. Lily stared at him like he'd switched sides mid-game. You got help without anyone blinking, she threw at him. You didn't see them arguing like this in front of you. Her voice dropped when she added the next part. No one made you feel like you cost too much, she whispered. That line hurt more than the shouting had, it just sat heavier. I felt my chest tighten because I knew that feeling personally. That sense that your needs are always a little extra and unwelcome. You didn't cost too much, I said, leaning toward her. You cost more than we actually had, those are different things. I watched her face carefully, trying to find any opening. If we lie and pretend we can handle it, you pay later with interest. She scoffed, throwing her head back, eyes rolling again. I already pay now, she answered, voice thick, with people thinking I made stuff up. She gestured toward her phone, toward the unseen comments piling up. And with knowing my own stepmother put a limit on me. I put a limit on the debt, I replied, stressing that last word. I'm still willing to help you chase a degree, just not like this. I held up my hand and started counting offers with my fingers. I can cover community tuition, help with a transfer later, support books and basic costs. She stared at my hand like every finger was an insult. You want me at some campus near home forever? She asked. You want me running into everyone who knows I got into better? Her mouth twisted, and I saw her pride bleeding in real time. I want you to graduate without being buried to your neck, I answered. I want you to have options at 25, not just obligations. I sighed, which I hated, because it sounded parental even to me. I'm not saying this version of your dream is fair or pretty. Dan slammed his palm on the table once, sudden and loud. Everyone jumped, even him, though he tried to play it off. I'm done hearing what we can't do, he barked, eyes on me. You paid that much once, you can find a way to match it again. From where? I asked, not backing up this time. You want me to cash out retirement, sell the house, what exactly? I spread my hands, not in surrender, just asking for specifics. Tell me which sacrifice will magically not hurt anyone later. His mouth tightened and he pointed straight at my chest. You always had something squirreled away before, some fallback, some trick, he accused. Use that, take a loan, figure it out, you're good at that. He leaned in, voice dropping to that dangerous calm he used in fights. If you really cared about her as yours, he said, you would move heaven and earth right now, just like you did before. He let the words hang there, measured and sharp. That's what loving a child looks like, no conditions attached. There it was, the test he'd been building since morning. Love equated with unlimited money, care measured in broken accounts. I felt something inside me finally stop bending, just go still. When you talk like that, I thought, you don't mean partner, you mean pipeline. Out loud I answered quietly, which somehow landed harder. Loving a child means honesty, not reckless promises you dump on someone else. I looked at Lily, not him, and held that eye contact. I love you enough to let you be mad at me for telling the truth. Her lip trembled and she stared back like SH. You wanted to see a crack. I let her look, I didn't soften anything in my face. If I had caved there, that would have been for my relief. Not for her future, not really. Dan straightened and pushed his chair back with a scrape. Then here it is, he announced, voice shaking with anger. If you refuse to step up for her the way you did for him, I cannot stay in this marriage. He pointed at the door like he was already halfway through it. Lily gasped, dropping the folded statement onto the table. You're giving her an ultimatum about me, she blurted. You're using me as the line in your relationship sand. Her eyes filled again, but now the tears were more complicated. You're the one who drew the line, he threw back, jabbing a finger toward me. You decided this is where generosity stops, this is on you. He dragged his gaze back to Lily with that wounded father expression. I will not watch my daughter be treated like a lesser priority. I stood up slowly, legs unsteady but holding. If you walk because I won't destroy our stability for one bill, I said. That choice is yours, and it started long before this envelope. My hands were trembling, but my voice did not crack this time. For years you spent first and planned later, I continued. You promised first and calculated later, you made me the fixer every single time. I felt that old shame try to creep in and I pushed it down. I am done playing the endless rescue fund for anyone. Evan rose too, putting himself between us without making it dramatic. Stop using her like a measuring stick for your guilt, he told his father. This is not about her failing us, this is about you avoiding your own reflection. His jaw flexed, but his tone stayed steady and clear. Lily stood next, chair bumping into the wall behind her. You emptied my account, let me drag her online, and then threatened divorce, she said. What exactly are you teaching me here about commitment and responsibility? Her hands were shaking, but her words landed like solid hits. He looked at each of us in turn, almost dazed, almost cornered. For a second, I thought he might actually sit back down. Then something hardened in his eyes, and I knew he was choosing. I can't live with someone who refuses my child the same support, he repeated. Then don't, I answered, and I stunned even myself. 3 words, simple and final, with every shared year behind them. The room went still enough that we could hear a car outside. He stared at me like I'd just spoken another language. You're really choosing money over family, he said slowly. That phrase used to work every time, it used to slice. Now it just sounded worn out and twisted in my ears. I'm choosing boundaries, I replied, because I want a future, not just emergencies. He opened his mouth again, then shut it, then grabbed his keys. No slammed bags, no dramatic speech, just a rough exhale and a turn. Come on, Lily, he tossed over his shoulder, hand on the knob. Pack a bag, you don't have to stay in this energy. My heart lurched because this was the part I feared most. Lily froze, eyes wide, caught between the doorway and the table. She looked at me, then Evan, then the printed 0 on the page. For a long few seconds, none of us breathed at all. Finally, she shook her head once, sharp and quick. I'm not going anywhere right now, she said, voice raw but firm. I can't even think straight, I'm not switching houses on top of this. She sank back into her chair, hands pressed flat to her knees. Dan stared like he hadn't considered that answer a possibility. You're staying with her after everything, he demanded, pointing at me again. She refused to help you chase the school you worked for. His voice cracked just enough that I knew this hurt him too. I'm staying because I need time, she replied, eyes on the table. And because you lied to me about having my back. She jabbed the folded statement with one finger hard. You let me light her up online while holding this in your drawer. He took a step toward her, then stopped when she flinched. Call me when you're ready, he finally managed, voice rough. He opened the door and walked out, pulling it shut behind him. The echo of that latch sounded louder than his entire speech. Silence settled in again, but it felt very different now. Evan exhaled slowly and dropped back into his chair. Lily stared at the statements like they might rearrange themselves. I stayed standing because sitting suddenly felt impossible. After a minute, Lily spoke without looking up. If I delete the post, people will think I lied, she murmured. If I leave it up, they keep hating you for something half true. Her fingers twisted the edge of the paper until it nearly tore. Edit it, I suggested, my voice softer than before. Say you learned more, say the situation is complicated, say you need space. I swallowed tasted metal but kept going. You don't owe anyone details, but you also don't owe them a scapegoat. She nodded slowly, still not meeting my eyes. I need time before I fix anything online, she said. I'm mad at all of you and I don't know where to put it. That honesty hurt, but it also felt like a small crack of hope. I can live with you being angry, I answered. I can't live with you making life choices based on a lie. I picked up one of the extra printouts and folded it carefully. Whatever school you end up at, I'll help you walk into it with open eyes. Evan stood and touched her shoulder once, gentle. I'll come by tomorrow, he told her, voice low and steady. We can look at options, all of them, not just the shiny one. She shrugged his hand off, but she didn't tell him to leave. He gave me a look as he headed for the door. Not pity, not hero worship, just this tired kind of solidarity. Text me if he calls, he said quietly. I nodded and then he was gone too. When the house finally emptied of voices, my legs gave out. I sat at the table again, staring at the blank space where he'd stood. The accusations still hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. For once, I didn't rush to open another tab of numbers. Instead, I pulled my phone closer and opened a new search. Not for scholarships, not for side gigs, not for balance transfers. I typed in 3 simple words that made my hands tremble. Family law attorney. Dozens of names filled the screen, overwhelming and distant. I scrolled slowly, reading short descriptions, staring at office locations. One listing mentioned free consultations and experience with blended families. I clicked that one and copied the number into my contacts. My thumb hovered over the call button and stayed there. Starting this process felt bigger than any transfer I'd ever made. I thought about backing out, waiting a week, letting things cool. Then I pictured him pointing at the door and at our daughter. I pressed call before I could talk myself out of it. A receptionist answered with a cheerful greeting that barely registered. We picked a day, a time, a rough idea of what I needed. When I hung up, my reflection stared back from the black screen. That is when I finally opened the app with the orange logo. I clicked Create Post and watched the empty box appear. My fingers hovered over the keyboard while my heart pounded. Am I the asshole, I typed, for refusing to fund my stepdaughter's college after paying for my stepson's?